Here we go. 3, 2, 1.
Boom! And welcome to the Big Honker Podcast, brought to you by Ducks Unlimited. I'm Jeff Stanfield with the world famous Andy Shaver.
One more month, we got the big Ducks Expo. So make sure you're in the great
Memphis area.
Tennessee.
Well, you're using the great really loose.
Yeah.
A lot of fine folks in Memphis. There's
There
also a lot of bad neighborhoods, so be safe when you're there, but come see us at Ducks. With us today from, are you in Memphis, Dr. Mike?
I am in Memphis.
The man with the plan and can tell us about all the stuff going on with geese today, Dr. Mike Brasher. You actually went and you banded Canada geese this morning, didn't you?
We sure did this morning and yesterday morning. I don't get out and do that too often. We did it last week as well. We kind of go along with our state partners. They're the ones that run these local Canada goose banding operations. We were with Arkansas Game and Fish last week and Tennessee Wildlife Resources Agency yesterday and today. Had some help from some local Fish and Wildlife Service folks as well. So it was fun. Probably got our hands on 400, maybe 500 of those local Canada geese over that time period. So always fun to get out, get messy with the birds.
How long have you lived in Memphis area?
6 years.
6
about
years.
That, yeah.
Have you seen
here in 2020?
Have you
2019?
Have you seen a drastic increase in the number of Canada geese since you've been there?
Not that I could notice necessarily. You know, I don't encounter a whole lot of Canada geese on the places where I visit. I have some that visit our property, you know, in September every year, and if I'm there at the right time, I'll take a few out, you know, make that flock a little bit smaller. But I've not seen a huge difference just from the places that I visit. But there's still a lot around. I know that. Well,
where we are in North Texas, I grew up in the Wichita Falls area. We didn't have any Canada geese local birds when I was a kid. They're in the thousands there now. Now, you go there. There's tons of them. They used to have, and now I've seen them as close as Seymour. So they're moving further west. They started up in the Red River and they've moved further west. And I think there's an early season now. Gainesville, some of that places, I think they have an early goose season somewhere around there. And Oklahoma has some places, and it's all the graders. But I was just wondering if even the cities up north have a lot more birds than they had 30 years ago.
Oh yeah, when you look over that time frame, for sure, the giant Canada geese, a tremendous, you can even say overly successful conservation story. I mean, I say that just, of course, to reiterate that, or to point out that in a lot of places they have grown, those populations have grown so much that they cause some human-wildlife conflicts. This is a sort of an unintentional sort of plug that we happen upon here. Starting later this month, I think it's right about the same time of the DU Expo, there's going to be a brand new exhibit in the Waterfowling Heritage Center there at the Bass Pro Pyramid. It's going to have a series of decoys, Canada goose decoys, the finest private collection of Canada goose decoys that maybe anywhere, I think is the story. And there has been a book written about sort of around those decoys and telling the history of Canada geese. And there's one part of that book that's going to tell the story of the giant subspecies of Canada geese that was once thought to be extinct and then was discovered. And then a lot of sort of reintroduction efforts have led to the tremendous success and tremendous population growth that we have today. So if folks are around for DUX and got some time, go check out that new museum exhibit at the Waterfowling Heritage Center. You will this will be the first place where you will have the opportunity to see it.
I want to check that out.
I might make a trek over.
Yeah, when I first got in the waterfowl business in the early '90s, we wintered. I'm going to guess 10 to 20,000 graders here. That's what we call it. We called them the graders. Mm-hmm. The bigger 12. They were the 12 to 13 pound Canada goose is what we had, and they were here in big flocks. Now, when I say a big flock, it was 180 to 100. Would be a big flock of them. But 20, 30, 40 birds was not that uncommon. But and it's what we had here. But as time went by 2000, 2002 and 3, you didn't see the big birds here anymore. They kind of got off, and we still had the small Canada geese. But when you hunted the wheat country area, we had a bunch of graders. And the biologists used to tell us then it was the farthest south that the graders came in big numbers. And they come out of North Dakota and South Dakota, and they would come here. We don't have them no more. But at that same time we lost them, then you started seeing graders in Wichita Falls and these other places. And I think a lot of the big birds they're so adaptive, they stopped off in city parks and stuff. And they said, screw it, why am I going to leave?
Well, yeah, for sure. The Canada geese they're the largest of outside of swans, they're the largest of our waterfowl here in North America. And they're the first that have sort of adapted to these changing climate conditions, changing landscape conditions, changing land cover conditions, the expansion of agriculture, and these birds figuring out, you can look at any species of waterfowl and you can see through time where they adapted to exploit some type of, they moved away from their natural habitats that they fed on during winter, and they figured out, hey, these humans are doing some things that can provide a lot of food for me, and in some cases they provide a lot of safety for me, and I'm going to change my behavior to take advantage of those, whether you're talking about snow geese that moved out of the historic coastal marsh on the Gulf Coast, or whether you're talking about Canada geese that also began to exploit waste grain left from agricultural operations, and same thing with white-fronted geese. So those bigger-bodied birds, just a natural feat of biology that they are the first ones to adapt to those conditions, and they're the most cold-hardy, the ones that are able to withstand those colder temperatures at more northern latitudes, as long as they have access to some of those, human-provided food resources, which that's what they do. Canada geese have adapted to some of those urban areas. And then they've also adapted to some of those agricultural fields. So, there's lots of stories, famous stories told about how those Canada geese have moved away from, abandoned some of those historical wintering destinations to more northern locations.
And nothing's going to take on a Canada goose and win at a park. I saw that video you shared recently. What something egret or something? Some water bird?
Man, that thing was so waterlogged.
It was.
I think it was a heron.
A heron?
But it had been, I think it was. I mean, part of me was thinking it was a night heron, but I don't know, so water, kind of when that happens, it changes the size of those birds. I also thought it was, I think it was a great blue heron, or that was going to be my best guess, but it was getting pounded, man.
Canada goose
that was a sight to see.
I mean, and you see them all the time. They take on golfers and cows.
Oh, they're not scared of nothing.
I mean, you know, what's a poor duck's going to go up to a big Canada goose at a city pond? It's going to get ran off. But
we had a kid this morning that was out banding with us, and so you get these big Canada geese out of this pen, and then you hand them over the fence to somebody that's waiting to then age and sex them, and then that person hands them off to another person that then will take them to the banding table. And so there's this kid, probably 10, 11 years old, who got one of these big adult males that was fresh from the person that had just aged and sexed it, and so he was. Those things are always like, if their head gets out from underneath their wing, which is one of the ways you can kind of keep them calm, is tuck their head under the wing. If they get that head out from under the wing, then all bets are off. Those things start struggling again. And so we heard a commotion and looked around, and the boy is on the ground wrestling with this Canada goose. To the boy's credit, he won that battle. He was able to subdue it and get it secured, and got that a big adult male. Got that guy banded and released back in the water. But yeah, he got up, and he had grass and leaves and mud all over his back. We were just lamenting the fact that we didn't get that on video.
That would be me. I'd get my ass kicked out there.
Are y'all's birds right now, are they molted where they can't fly?
That's right. That's right. They are molted. Some of these have no flight feathers that have grown back in yet. And those primaries, they drop all those primary feathers at the same time, and then they start regrowing those feathers, and they're flightless for 30, 40 days or something like that. But yeah, some of these birds had just started regrowing their feathers.
Okay, I want to change it up on geese. I want to talk to you and ask you a question. This may not be in your wheelhouse, but the Mexican tree duck, or black-bellied tree ducks, whatever you want to call them.
Okay.
We have a lot more of them. We don't have as many in town this year as we did last year.
I saw 2 of them just 3 days ago.
Did you?
I did. They flew over my house.
We had a bunch, though, for a little bit. But I was in Wichita Falls the other day at Chicken Express, and 2 of them walked across the road with 13 babies.
Wow.
Which to me would be a big hatch. Now, do they have their nest or in the trees? So they kick these they kick these babies
They're cavity
out.
nesters.
Do they go to water then with the babies, or do they just walk around these people's yard and try to get up in a tree again, or will they actually go to water?
No, they will need water. They need water partly for some of their food, also for escape cover. I mean, they're geared to live in wetland areas, that live in wetlands, and the cover it provides and all the different food items it does. But yeah, they'll still get out and get on land occasionally, and feed in people's yards and things like that. Not those types of things aren't uncommon either for those birds, but they will go to water initially and spend a great deal of their time in that young stage in the water in our wetlands.
It's crazy too, because being a hunter, everybody thinks, oh, he's a hunter, he don't care about that stuff. I was so concerned because one of the little babies was having hell getting up the curb. Mm-hmm. And I thought,
I know, it's amazing how that happens.
I'm gonna stop in the road and I'm gonna go help this thing get across the curb. And then he got to a spot. I don't know if he stepped on a pebble or what, but he jumped right up there. But I actually was fixing to stop my truck and help him get up over the deal, just because I love them birds that much.
Golly, we had so this morning, kind of to that point, as we were pulling out of Hatchie National Wildlife Refuge, which is one of the places where we were visiting and checking things out, there was a turtle crossing the road. And so before I got out on the road, I stopped, got out, helped the turtle get out of the road. He's about halfway across, and I put him on the other side. Now you just hope that I didn't put him on the wrong side of the road and he comes back. And then also a month or so ago, coming down a 6-lane surface road here in Memphis, I was at a traffic light, and there was a hen mallard and her 8 or 9 ducklings that were trying to cross that road. And I just knew that they were just going to end up as a big grease spot. And I think she made it. All I know is that a bunch of cars stopped. I had to keep going by that time. But I looked in the rearview mirror and there was a big line of cars that had stopped. So I think she made it across. That's my story.
Let her go by. I saw the one video. It was I think it was a mallard, but she had a couple ducklings with her and they're following, and every one of them, one falls in like a sewage drainage.
Oh, they all go.
And then she turns around. All of them but one had made it across this thing. One falls down. She comes back to see where it went, and then all of them.
Did the fire department come get them all out?
I don't. That's how the video ends, Jeff. I don't know. Probably didn't have a happy ending.
They get calls for that all the time. I saw a video though of a boy from Mississippi the other day was wanting to save a soft-shelled snapping turtle. He grabbed this soft-shelled snapping turtle. Those things can get their heads out of their deal real quick and bit his ass.
Oh no!
I'm telling you right now, that guy is never stopping for a turtle ever again. I promise you.
Yeah, you gotta be careful with those. You gotta know what kind of turtle you're picking up.
I don't know nothing about turtles, and I'm not probably gonna go pick one up. But I did not realize a soft shell snapping turtle's neck can go out so long, and they can reach back around and grab you. And that boy didn't realize it either until it was too late.
Just trying to do the right thing.
My dad used to always tell me if they ever bite you, they'll only let go when it thunders. Yeah. So if I was that boy, I'd be looking for.
I heard that too.
I'd be looking for a storm real fast if I was him.
There's got to be some way.
So what's our duck number?
Hold on. I want to go back to the giant Canada goose. When they found them again, there was only like a dozen or so, wasn't there? There weren't very many.
I think that's right. I am not a Canada goose expert.
Yeah.
Not really a goose expert at all either. But yeah, Silver Lake, Minnesota. I do know from talking with actually the colleague of mine that wrote that book that's going to accompany those decoys and help tell that story. Silver Lake, Minnesota is where they were rediscovered. It was a small number. I know that. And, it's far from a small number now, though. But it's going to be, I've read excerpts from that book. I think it's a very limited distribution of that book. Mm-hmm. If you're lucky enough to get your hands on it, I think they're going to be selling them. Selling a limited number at each of the locations where this collection is going to be shown. But yeah, it tells this story and he pulls from a lot of history and a lot of obscure stories and magazine articles and newspaper articles from 100 years ago, sort of trying to do some forensics on where these birds might have been, sort of tracing the history of a lot of these different subspecies of Canada geese. And some pretty cool stories I think are going to make its way into that book. So check it out and get your hands on it if you can.
Hopefully I'll try to find it when I'm there. So I want to kind of expand, with what we've seen with like you said, the adaptation that these geese are doing. we know about the ducks on the East Coast. A heavy percentage of ducks on the East Coast have basically pen-raised bird genetics. Like if we expand another 50 years, 100 years, what could our migration look like if we continue to urbanize the way that we are?
Well, I don't want to speculate too much, but I don't think it would be the same as what we've had historically. The research that has been done thus far on linking the genetics of birds to their migration behaviors, their movement behaviors, is telling a story where these birds are different. The game farm birds are different. The game farm, and then the offspring of game farm and wild mallard hybrids are also different. The higher the percentage of game farm ancestry, the more those birds are sort of affiliated with urban habitats. They use they are associated with more urban habitats. Their movements are more erratic. They're not as the distances they move are not as long. Some of that we think may be related to physiology. Some of it could be related to things as specific as the nature of their mitochondria and their efficiency in converting food into energy. Those are some of the things that we're just starting to peel back the layers on. So I don't know. In another 50 years, but I feel confident saying it would not be a good thing. If you appreciate sort of the mystery of the migration of wild birds, why they go, where they go, and when they go, I think we would definitely lose that. We also potentially stand to lose associations with some of those historical areas. I think there's also a lot of things that we just don't fully understand yet, and that's why we're investing in some of the work that we are. But it's hard for me to find anything good about it. Mm-hmm. I can't exactly say how it will be. I can't tell you exactly how it will be different. But man, I'd rather have wild mallards and have all the different elements of the mystery and migration and some of those more natural things with the birds that I'm out chasing.
Yeah, it's just crazy. I mean, just all of these things that we never really put two and two together. Every city wants a pretty pond to go be able to jog around, but you don't think of the consequences that it might have on something as simple as ducks and geese and how they migrate and where they migrate.
Well, that's right. A lot of those game farm birds are out there because of those intentional releases associated with sort of supplementing local shooting opportunities. But some of them are out there because people buy them from whatever local farm supply and will release them in their neighborhood pond. And I find myself now more than ever when I'm in an urban area, or even a sort of suburban area, and I see mallards of some type out on these ponds in a community or even on a river in town, find myself wondering, like, is that a bird that has some game farm genetics in it, that has an ancestor that came from Tractor Supply or wherever else it may be? Or is that a bird that has its ancestors traced to Alaska or North Dakota or Saskatchewan? So there's some different birds out there. A mallard is just because it looks like a mallard doesn't mean that it's going to behave like the mallard that you grew up with and that your grandparents grew up with nowadays.
Yeah. We came back from Disney World. We went to Disney World in May, and there's tons of mallards at Disney World just hanging out. But they don't look like the typical mallard either, though. Like, you can kind of tell that
they look a little thin.
They look thin. Their beaks are different, and you could just tell. Like, it looked like a mallard on the surface, but if you really got to like looking at the details, it was far from it.
And it's interesting that 10 years ago I would ask this question to myself, what has made mallards so adaptable to these urban areas? You don't see gadwall there, you don't see wood ducks, you don't see pintails, you don't see shovelers in these heavily urbanized areas. And I was thinking to myself, what is it? What's the gene in these mallards that has allowed them to take advantage of those areas? It turns out genetically they're different from the wild mallards that thought I was trying to come up with a solution for. So that's the explanation. Is they're fundamentally genetically different in terms of that ancestry. But I mean, the point would be there still is something genetically coded that has allowed them to see that landscape and the resources that it provides as being different than the way a wild mallard views it. Which that in itself, I mean, it's a pretty cool thing. That those types of things are controlled for in the genetics somehow. But all that said, getting back to your original question, I don't think that's what we want our future to look like. There's enough signals already that those birds are different, and they're different in not necessarily a good way, the way we like to think about, the mallards that we've all fallen in love with as hunters.
Right. There's a wild flock. They're wild mallards. I don't know what their genetics are in Wichita Falls, that comes off Lake Wichita and goes to a neighborhood, and they're there for 4 months. The guy's got corn. He puts it in his front yard. There's 300, 400, 500 mallards going to his place every day. Just right over the neighborhood and just land right there. And you can go to some neighborhoods now there, and there's mallard ducks in all the yards where they nest and stuff there.
Is that the video that I've seen where there's like 100 mallards landing in somebody's front yard?
Probably so. And the guy just feeds them. He sits on his front porch, throws some corn out. But they're wild mallards, but then they'll disappear. But then this time of year, there'll be the females will have some babies, and there'll be males and females. There's a lot of ducks and geese in Wichita all the time. But because they've done a really good job of building water places through town. But those ducks will come in the wintertime, and they feed there, just like if we was doing an afternoon field duck hunt somewhere.
But all that corn can't be good for them, can it? I mean, it's like basically having a cow on corn all year.
Oh, I mean, yeah, you could say it's the waterfowl version of the standard American diet. It's just
right.
just carbohydrates, right? So
sugar.
Now, and that's right. And they'll eat other things. They have to, right? But man, they love corn. It's like cocaine. It's like and to a mallard, and they need more than just corn, and they have the ability to find that. But you get into these conversations, and it does make me wonder, like, if you were to do some sort of nutritional analysis on those birds that are fed only corn in these modern day situations in urban landscapes, and that may be supplemented with some of those heavy corn diet, and you compare it to some of these others in more natural habitats, what do some of those more advanced blood panel metrics look like? And I don't know, just kind of curious about those types of things.
Well, I talking about Disney World, I kind of wondered about the same thing with the ducks at Disney World. Like, what does their blood panel look like? Like, are they living longer just because they don't have to deal with natural predators, hunters? Is that enough to kind of offset the curve, or are they just, are they dying around the same time of diseases and bad nutrition from living off of French fries and Dole Whips?
I don't know. That's not my area of expertise. I can just kind of think about it and speculate a little bit.
Yeah, no, I'm with you there, but I was just kind of thinking along the same lines of how healthy. There's a bunch of mallards at Disney World, but how healthy are they actually? Right? You know what I mean? So, it's just something to speculate about. Maybe one day y'all dive off into that. You got your hands full though with everything else that's going on. So maybe
we do. We've got a lot going on.
Maybe wait for Disney World until we get some other stuff figured out. So back in March, we got a pretty startling report from Ducks Unlimited. U.S. bird populations continue alarming decline. New report finds. The details of this are pretty startling. Loss of 3 billion birds in North America over 50 years.
Yeah, so that statistic, 3 billion birds, that came from a 2019 study that was co-authored by a slew of sort of bird scientists across North America and even beyond. They looked at a variety of data sets and kind of built this picture of the change in overall bird populations in North America. And they found that the numbers that we have now are about 3 billion smaller than what we had in the 1970s. And a lot of those declines were pretty universal across different groups of birds. There were some notable exceptions. Waterfowl stood out as one of those exceptions. Raptors stood out as another exception. The increase from the 1970s in raptor populations was heavily tied to the banning of DDT and the way it allowed raptor populations to to recover. And waterfowl, of course, a lot of that signal of being the one of only two groups of birds that had increased since the 1970s, a lot of that was related to the tremendous growth in goose populations. But even when you pull the goose populations out of that overall summary statistic, you still saw dabbling ducks and diving ducks that had increased substantially since the 1970s. And there's a great conservation success story to be told there in terms of that longer term view of the success of our collaborative continental scale conservation efforts. But then the State of the Birds report, which is separate than that 2019 report that I referenced. State of the Birds report is put out every 2 or 3 years by a consortium of conservation organizations, and it's another snapshot. That the 2019 report was, we look back over 50 years, this really tremendous data set, and then the State of the Birds report sort of do some sort of update to that periodically, and they continue to show the same thing. Most bird populations continue to decline, some at dramatic levels. Grassland birds are the steepest, the group of birds that have declined the most since the 1970s. Waterfowl continue to be an exception. One of the things, however, that we've done in that report recently is we've separated out explicitly the geese from the diving and dabbling ducks, and then the sea ducks as well, because each of those tells a little bit of a different story.
Right.
And so, again, this year was a notable opportunity for us to point out that despite those long-term gains in duck populations, we've seen some declines here over the past 10 years. We've spoken about those a number of times over the past couple of years, linked to that prolonged drought across good portions of the prairies, demonstrating this sort of future scenario of what our population might look like if we lost a lot of that wetland capacity up there permanently. If the wetlands that we have right now are a hypothetical future scenario in the face of extensive drainage and so forth, and continued loss of grasslands and wetlands, then what we have right now might someday be the peak, might be the high. And so we don't want that, right? So that's why we continue to fight for responsible policies and programs and incentives to keep wetlands intact, keep grass on the landscape, both in the U.S. and in Canada, so that once the prairies get wet again, these duck populations can rebound again.
So what would be like a grassland bird? They're down 43% long term. What do we look? What kind of bird is that?
Yeah, best example that most people are going to know about would be a meadowlark.
Okay.
Whether you're talking eastern meadowlark, a western meadowlark, that's one of the flagship species that for that group of birds that the general public would be familiar with. But there's a lot of sparrows. There's a lot of other sort of obscurely named birds that most folks won't have heard of.
Yeah.
A pipit, a lark, things of that, horned lark, a few other birds of that type. So
I haven't noticed this until you said that about field larks or meadowlarks.
Meadowlarks, right?
There used to be tons of those here, and you don't see them like you used to.
Yeah, and they're cool birds, man. For most of the grassland birds are brown, real cryptic. Because these birds. That's the other cool thing about these. Most of the birds that we are familiar with in our backyards nest in the trees, or they'll nest in a shrub or something like that up off the ground. These grassland birds, they nest on the ground. Mm-hmm. Same as a lot of the dabbling ducks that we are all familiar with, mallards, pintails, teal. They nest on the ground. These grassland birds nest on the ground as well, so they have to be incredibly well camouflaged. So that's why most of them are just this very drab brown. But meadowlarks are cool because they are that brown, but they're yellow, have this bright yellow breast, and they call. They'll get up on a fence post, or they'll get up on a dead tree, and they'll call, and are up on a power line sometimes. That's the other cool thing about birds, that I was thinking about recently is most of our species of wildlife that we have out there, they try to hide from you.
Yeah.
Like deer, squirrel, rabbits, they don't like to be seen. Birds, they'll find the highest tree, they'll find the highest perch, and then they'll sit there and they'll call. They say, "Hey, here I am. Look at me."
They'll taunt you.
So That's right. I think that's one of the other reasons why they fascinated so many people. Whether you're talking ducks, whether you're talking cardinals, sparrows, meadowlarks, whatever, they're just cool.
Do you the blue-winged teal? What are their numbers? Way down again too?
It doesn't say that on here,
but I think their numbers are down.
I'd have to look.
You're talking the North Dakota survey.
Just the blue-winged teal in general in North America.
So we don't have the numbers this year for the overall survey, for the large North American survey. The only survey that's out right now is North Dakota survey. And actually, I did not look at that species-specific table from that survey to be able to tell you exactly what blue-winged teal are doing. Let's see if it says in the summary here. Most of them were pintails, mallards were down. Let me see if I can find this here. Do you remember? Either you guys remember looking at that?
I'm trying to find it right now.
So the pintail numbers are down, but then we increased the limit to 3 birds from 1 bird in many states. I don't understand that, but I don't understand the blue-winged teal, whatever their numbers are, the percentage of them that get killed by hunters has got to be very, very slim, because the majority of them go to South America, Mexico, Central America. They don't even get hunted. So I don't understand why. I feel sorry for the outfitters, and I know we're not setting rules by outfitters, but the guys that run hunts for the teal in southern Louisiana, I feel sorry for, because they got half of their teal season yanked out from under them, and I don't even know what they're killing makes a big difference on the numbers, anyways, on the overall mortality rate of them.
Yeah, so I'm looking at the summary here for the North Dakota survey. Blue-winged teal, green-winged teal, pintails they declined significantly within the state. I don't have the percentage here, but we're talking only about North Dakota for the current year survey. Yeah. They have the Fish and Wildlife Service, Canadian Wildlife Service, and everybody else associated with it have completed this year's big BPOP survey. They're crunching the numbers right now. They'll be out in August or September. We'll get the big picture later on. Yeah. To your question there about blue-winged teal, the very, very low harvest rate on blue-winged teal. We were looking at this the other day. It's like 2, 3, 4% harvest rate on blue-winged teal. And it is a bit of a head scratcher. And you have to, I think, to understand, to try to make sense of the regulatory framework that's in place for blue-winged teal, you kind of have to trace its history. It started out with 9 days. Now, there isn't near the level of scientifically, I guess, derived data, not near the volume of data that informs the blue-winged teal harvest strategy as there is that informs a mallard harvest strategy, the AHM. It's based on mallards. Mallard is the most intensively, and that's not really a fair comparison for blue-winged teal either, or any other species, because the mallard is the most intensively studied of any species of waterfowl on the planet. But comparatively speaking, the blue-winged teal strategy was not based on as much scientific data. It was data, and it still is data that informs it, and it's good data, but it is not. They did not take it to the same level as they did the adaptive harvest management strategy for let's say mid-continent mallards. So what they did is they started out with a 9-day season, and then as the early season, 9-day early teal season, because they used to not have an early teal season. But kind of to your point, a lot of the states were like, hey, let's put in a special teal season, to take advantage of these birds that come through very early and that otherwise our hunters don't have an opportunity to hunt. And so that's how the September teal season came about to begin with. And when they were first putting it in place, they have to come up with some place to start. They use the data that they have to figure out what's the harvest that's going to occur. And they did some estimation, and they end up with 9 days. And then as we went through the 90s and into the 2000s, the blue-winged teal population dramatically increased. I think it was in the early 2000s that it began to dramatically increase, and they were still stuck at 9 days. And so the individual states, the Flyweight Council, began to kind of talk about and petition and ask for a bonus opportunity, if you will, bonus days, once the blue-winged teal breeding population got above a certain level. And so they came to agreement on that, and I forget what the number is. I'd have to go back and look at it. But once a blue-winged teal breeding population got above that level, then they went to a 16-day season. So while I get what you're saying in that, no one really is going to think that by reducing it from 16 down to 9, we're going to dramatically affect the harvest rate or the overall harvest and the impact of harvest on the population. It nevertheless is an artifact of the way that harvest strategy came about. Once you get back down below that 4 million, you kind of go back to or whatever that number is, you go back to the original early season opportunity that was provided. And so that allows us to think about it a little bit different. But you're right. Going from 16 down to 9, that's not going to change the harvest rate very much. But it's the agreed upon strategy, and that's kind of where we are. And it takes a lot of time to redo those things. That's the other unfortunate thing about it. It's not just as simple as saying, well, let's change it. It takes time.
Yeah.
It's kind of like dove season. I've never understood why dove season don't open September 1st and end into January. Really, I mean, we're the only one of the few states that really hunts them hard anyways. It's not going to change the numbers any.
I bet you that relates to language in the Migratory Bird Treaty Act. I'm not confident on that. I think that language applies to all the migratory birds that are covered under that. There's a maximum number of days that a hunting season can be offered for migratory birds.
Right.
So I think that's probably what's going on there. Don't know that for certain though.
Because I think we're probably at 70. Probably 75 or 80
probably
days.
Maxed out at whatever it is.
That's 100, 100 and something, I think.
The 108's with waterfowl, isn't it?
Yeah, 107 or something like that, 110.
It's over 100 days, but like our dove season opens September 1st, and I think we close around November 11th, and then we open up again.
We have a 2-week season
71.
in Christmas.
That puts us at 85 or 88 days, which is the typical season, unless you're in a high plains mallard like we are for the ducks.
Right.
So that's probably why then. But that's good. I've never had that answer, but that makes sense. But if you're going by mortality rate, 15% of all mallards die every year anyways. So I'm sure whatever doves are is probably more than that, but they bounce back. So they have 3 hatches a year or 2.
Yeah. Yeah. The mortality rate on doves is going to be higher regardless of whether you're talking hunting or, non-hunting. I mean, it's they're a smaller bird.
Yeah.
Their mortality rate is going to be higher to begin with. So yeah, right. From an overall harvest standpoint, and most of that harvest occurs real early. Like most of the people that go out dove hunting are going to go out first part of the season, and then they shift to other types of hunting.
I saw blue-winged teal today.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you, Dr. Mike. So how long what's the gestation period, for lack of a better term? I don't know what it's incubation period for a blue-winged teal and the eggs.
I think it's around 25 days, give or take. I'd have to look that up to be exact. I think it's somewhere in that low to mid 20 range. I think you're with mallards and pintails, you're looking at about 28 days, something like that. I hope I'm getting that right. It's been a while since I've been out in the field, kind of having to do that math and being familiar with that on a daily basis from a breeding ecology standpoint. But blue-winged teal have a shorter incubation period than some of those others. They kind of have to be because they get up there later, right?
Yeah.
And they
I mean, it's July.
It's somewhere around there.
It's July, and we saw them here in Texas. So
I don't think those birds ever left.
You don't think so? Well, I saw them all. We were very, very wet in April and May. We dried off for a couple of weeks, just enough for like all the sheet water to kind of go away. But the whole time there was sheet water, I kept seeing blue-winged teal. And then the sheet water went away, I quit seeing them. And now we've got a couple inches of rain over the last couple of days. And now the blue-winged teal are everywhere again. You don't think that they're going to go up to the breeding grounds?
I don't think it's July 2nd. They're here. I think they had babies here. But it's crazy. We can have no ducks at all. Like where our lodge sits away from the playa area where we do a lot of our goose hunting. And when we have a big rain here and these fields get water in it, all of a sudden there's ducks here. And I'm like, how the hell did they know we have ducks 10 miles away from where water? They just show up. Well, today I had to go to Haskell and there was 2 blue-winged teal swimming in the ditch. And that area I go through the playa area and everything is full and running. It's crazy to be in July. And we just had another 1/4 to 1/2 inch of rain just in the last hour. I just looked down there. But we've been wet. But we've got these ducks here. Well, they're not going to go back up north. So I'm assuming those ducks have stayed here and had their babies here. And
blue-winged teal are pretty notorious for that. They will, and I don't know which ones do that. I don't know if it's some of the laggards that stick around. Or the work that we're doing now on duck DNA causes me to wonder if any of this, if all of this stuff is genetically controlled. Are there certain parts of their genome that are causing those blue-winged teal to be more pioneering from year to year in terms of where they go and where they stop to breed? Because it's not uncommon to hear blue-winged teal breeding in coastal Louisiana or coastal Texas. Not all birds are that way. Some of them are more hardwired to go back to northern landscapes, whether you're talking redheads, canvasbacks, scaup. You don't see as many of those doing in these sort of vagrant locations hanging out during the breeding season unless they're injured. So it's, again, another fascinating thing about all the different species of waterfowl, how they do things differently.
Pioneer is an interesting word that you use right there. That just thinking about that, like in human terms, like, most people kind of play it safe and kind of, just have a good life. And then you got this outlier group of pioneers that
outlaws
go to the faraway land.
Thing.
Yeah, and try to carve out a different way of doing it. And then when you look at ducks, there could just be this genome in them that they don't want to go back to the way that their grandparents did it.
Yeah, because they don't all do it, right? It's
right.
Like most of them every year will go back to the prairies, but there are some that don't.
Yeah.
Why not? Are they the late migrants? Is it simply related to that? And maybe their late migration is just related to some poor habitat conditions that they encountered and had to endure during winter. And in that case, it's entirely environmentally controlled. Or is it partially genetics? And it wouldn't surprise me if it's a little bit of both. That's kind of the way most answers to questions of nature are. It's not one single answer. It's typically multiple, and they're typically interacting, and that makes it hard to figure out the answer.
Because we got blue-winged teal here right now.
Mind here.
We got blue-winged teal here right now, and we've got mallards here right now.
Yeah. Well, the mallards, again, wild card on the mallard.
Yeah, who knows? I mean, but we do have mallards here, but they're not here the last 2 summers we've had water where they could nest. The East Lake over there's had water in it for 30 months now, basically. So we've got some places that we held that, and now we've got the Mexican tree ducks that are here having babies all the time. But what's crazy is they're gone by the time hunting season. We had one flock that stayed here during the hunting season.
Yeah.
And that was it. The rest of them are gone. But that's a weird thing too, because I've been in this business a long time, and I've been hunting out here for 50 years. In my first 45 years of hunting out here, 48, or I'm going to say 45, we never saw a Mexican tree duck. Never.
Yeah.
Now it's common. Like if I went home today and one of them was floating around by my swimming pool, I would not be shocked at all. If I don't see one, I won't be shocked. But before, we never had that. White-winged dove. 15 years ago, we didn't have white-winged dove. We have millions of them now.
Yeah. Nature's cool, man. It just really is. I will ask you guys a question related to this. Things change, and we're seeing different things now than we did 10 or 20 years ago. Did y'all happen to get your DU magazine yet?
I did.
The latest issue?
The gear one?
And did you see the article in there about falling snows, the decline of mid-continent snow geese?
No, I saw that I think that's on the cover, isn't it? It's just a little blurb on the cover. I haven't opened it yet. It got here yesterday, and I hadn't had time to look at it.
I looked at the products, and I read the Duck Czar one story.
Okay.
That's the only thing I've looked at. I didn't look at nothing else last night. I just kind of thumbed through it. Tell us a story. Are the snow goose populations crashing?
Well, mid-continent snow goose population has declined according to several data sets. It's declined by about 80%.
Wow.
In the past 10 years or so, 10, 15 years. And I mean, it's kind of hard to imagine that. I think there's still, to be fair, some studying to be done, still some evaluation of some parts of those data, but there are multiple data streams that point to a declining population. I don't think there's any debate about whether it has declined. If you want to argue if it's 80% versus 60%, I think that's probably a legitimate debate. But regardless, it is one of the most steeply declining waterfowl populations in North America right now. Now, we're talking about the mid-continent population of light geese. That's snow geese and Ross's geese combined. And some of that may be related to birds moving out of their northern breeding areas and colonizing or expanding some breeding colonies in other locations, but there are also very clear signals of some causal mechanisms for those declines unrelated to possible sort of emigration out of those breeding colonies. And that relates to a series of multiple years of very, very low recruitment. You guys, I think, hunt geese a little bit, at least you're in the area that, and talk with a lot of folks that do. And so you know how reliant hunting success for geese is on a good hatch. It's not uncommon for there to be a total bust in production for geese and some of those Arctic nesting geese if they get poorly timed weather conditions, adverse weather conditions up there. It could be cold, it could be rainy, and if that happens at the wrong time, because those snow geese and Ross's geese hatch at such pretty much all at the same time, if you get a bad storm come through at the wrong time, you can essentially wipe out all the production for an entire colony just with that one weather event, and they will not re-nest. They get one shot at it. That's the other thing about them. So when you string together multiple years of that, you get a declining population. You guys know that Texas withdrew from the light goose conservation order. We talk about that a little bit in that article. That's a much bigger discussion. There are folks way, way smarter than I am that know the data better than I do to talk about that. But I guess I just wanted to bring that up to point out there's yet another group of birds, one that has been among the more intensively group of or species of waterfowl or groups of waterfowl. We thought we knew all the answers, and now here we are a few years later. And it's like, oh my gosh, we've got a declining population, dramatically declining population, and we're trying to figure out exactly what's causing it and what are the implications of it. And so just another one of the things that keeps us fascinated and intrigued in this world of waterfowl science.
That's kind of a, I don't know, it's kind of a double-edged sword, because we had the conservation order to put a damper on, we got to save the tundra, and now we're saving the tundra, and now it's like, oh shit, we need to figure, we got to pump the brakes, something's got to change.
What do you think the goose percentage is, of the snow goose population percentage is of the birds that get shot in the conservation season compared to non-conservation season? 50% or more?
Oh, it's more than that. I'm supposed to know that. We may have even mentioned it in the article, or else we had it in an earlier draft and then we pulled it out. But the majority, the majority of the harvest now occurs in the light goose conservation order. I know that for a fact. I don't know the exact percentage though. But yeah, that was one of the things. Another interesting thing, that some of the data, like we make decisions and we try to draw conclusions about what we're seeing in nature based on the best available data. At any point in time, we don't see all of what's happening. We don't have all of the data. We never will. Science is a process. It is a process of collecting data in a rigorous fashion, analyzing it, studying it, asking more questions, expanding the scale of our data collection, making sure we've got it right. It's a process, and we learn through time, and that's what we've continued to do with these snow geese. And then occasionally different things start happening. That's one of the reasons why it is so important to maintain all these important data collection programs that our states and federal partners and others are contributing to. And so with regard to sort of science as a process, one of the things that we learned is that some of the early information about the geese were so abundant that they were destroying Arctic ecosystems. It turns out that the most intensive damage was happening at a pretty small scale at a couple of different locations. And it seems to be, we think it was related to the fact that those areas were visited by both migrant snow geese that were traveling back to more northern breeding colonies, as well as birds that had set up shop to breed there. So it was sort of a double whammy. All the other areas in this vast Arctic landscape weren't getting exposed to that same pressure, so they were not being as damaged as much. There was damage, but not as severe as what it was there in sort of the Hudson Bay lowlands, which was sort of the epicenter for some of that study. But we learned. We kept asking questions. We kept collecting data, and eventually you get a fuller picture of that story, and that's what it's about. You know, it's like, just because we come up with something, we we talk about things differently now, or we make a different decision now, doesn't mean that we were wrong in the past.
Right.
It just means that we didn't have all the data. We made a decision based on the best available data and as much as we had, kind of given the resources at the time. So just we outline a number of those things in that article.
Yeah, I'm looking at it. I'm skimming through trying to find any numbers that I could find via conservation order versus regular season. But
yeah, I have that data somewhere, but it would take me a minute to get to it.
No, you're good. We're gonna start wrapping up with you here because I know you got a hard out here. So I'll start wrapping up with this. Do you think that more states are going to follow Texas in doing away with the conservation order with the declining numbers of snow geese that we're seeing?
I'll be honest, I don't have a good read on that. Okay. I really don't. That's not a cop-out. I have not talked to our state partners. They're the ones that make that decision.
Yeah.
I don't know. I can tell you that I'm not aware of any others that are going to be making that decision in the near future. But that just means I'm not aware of it.
Right.
They may be having those discussions. I'll be at a Flyway meeting in August, the Mississippi Flyway meeting. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to make it to the Central Flyway meeting. If any of the states are talking about that, they'll probably be discussing it there. But I honestly do not know what their current stance is on it.
Yeah, it made sense for Texas, like especially a long time ago, back in the late 90s, early 2000s, we had a week or two of snow geese coming through here. We don't have it anymore. I mean, Texas doing away with it, there really wasn't much opportunity, especially in our neck of the woods.
The last 2 years, we could have shot snow geese afterwards, but we were really cold and it stayed cold.
Right.
But the 5 years before that,
nothing.
We didn't even have a freaking goose. The blue-winged teal were already past us, almost going back. I mean, it was, but the last couple of years, I'm glad they done with the conservation season. Pat Pitt educated me on something, and I've known Pat for a long time. Probably longer than you are aged.
Probably so. I believe that. He's a great man.
And Pat told me he thinks the conservation season has messed with the other waterfowl because it puts too much stress on them. Even though they're not getting shot, they listen to that hammering around. That's the pressure on them. And I think Pat's onto something. I really do. And I think that we have definitely made it harder on the other birds because of conservation season and shooting the mallards, and the mallards are becoming nocturnal, and that's a man-made issue also.
Yeah. You know, one of the things that I've said this before, I don't know if I've said it to you guys, but hunters deserve a lot of credit. Hunters deserve a lot of credit for a lot of different things. One of the things they deserve credit for are the observations they make, such as what you just talked about, what Pat has observed and shared with you. That's the first step in the scientific process. A lot of the scientists that study waterfowl are hunters. That's where they make their observations as well, as in the blind and talking with folks like you and like, you might be onto something there. That's an observation of something that's happening in nature. And then you let that scientific process continue on its way where you start to craft these possible explanations for that, which is what you've just done. And then you figure out, well, what data do we need in order to test what our hypothesis is, what we think is going on? So hunters are at the forefront of the scientific process, whether they realize it or not. They're involved in it in many different ways. They're at the forefront in making these observations, talking about them, sharing them with the scientists that they may have an interaction with. And then also they come into play when it amounts to collecting the data through band recoveries, through the harvest surveys. All of those things are crucial parts of that process. I hope hunters realize that and value the role that they play in this process all along the way, because then they are the beneficiaries of the decisions that get made by the managers and the agencies in response to everything that we've learned all along the way. I mean, to me, that's one of the coolest parts of this, being a waterfowl hunter and knowing that the stuff that I get to do and everyone else gets to do in that have gone to school and done all this kind of scientific training. It's a lot of what we do is because of the hunters and the observations and data that y'all and others provide.
Yeah. Being
a hunter myself, that's really cool.
Yeah. Always gotta be looking. You always gotta be paying attention. Well, listen, Dr. Mike, we really appreciate you coming on here. We're going to get you out of here. We'd love to have you back on whenever the big report comes out and everybody's making heads or tails of the numbers here. So we look forward to that, and we'll get you back on, and
we'll shake your hand, and we'll see you in Memphis.
We'll see you in just
I was going to ask you, you guys are going to be here, right? I will definitely swing by and visit with y'all. I'll be there all 3 days. Got a lot of stuff going on. And so, if any of your listeners are there, swing by. We'll be at the DU seminar booth a while. We'll be at the DU conservation booth. Might even pop in at our DU podcast place a time or two, but we'll be around.
I think we're
seeing everybody.
We're doing 3 or 4 shows while we're there. I think we're the first show that Friday morning, 10 a.m. So we'll be there.
Yeah, I think so.
All right, Dr. Mike, good seeing you. We will see you in about 3 weeks, sir. You take good.
That's right.
Have a great day, my friend.
Thanks, and happy Independence Day.
That's right. That's right.
God bless you, my friend. Thank you.
I'll too. Bye-bye.
All right. We are out of there.
And yes, we filmed this right at Independence Day.
We did. It's
because I'm in Maine now.
It's coming out a little bit later, but not too much later. But yeah. Anyway,
right. Very interesting topic. He's a very interesting man. I could talk about that all day long.
Yep.
So we are a Waterfowl podcast still.
We are.
There you go.
We are. We proved it today.
Yep. Thank y'all for listening to us. God bless y'all and have a great day.
Bye. Watch for deer. Check out all of our wonderful sponsors. Go check out Ducks Unlimited. Be in Memphis. First week in August is going to be a great time. Dirty Duck Coffee, Shin Gear, Looking Glass Podcast, Lucky Duck, Dive Bomb Industries, Pacific Calls. Use our promo code BHP25. Boss Shot Shells, Mossberg, Stanfield Outfitters, Mallard Bay, and Witchaw Chevrolet.